So what we hear a lot about in spirituality is this whole ego thing. And we throw it at each other. You're an egoist, no, you're an egoist. They're so egocentric, it's a means to condemn and to shame and to make wrong of the other. At the same time, ego has another side to it, which is the anti-ego, what you could call the anti-ego, which is that I'm not allowed to be an egoist, I'm not good enough, poor me. It always has a shadow. As a form, it always has a shadow. So, Bart talked yesterday about these layers of self in a way, of selfhood, of the forms of self. That there is this identity, this kind of essential, timeless flavor of an individual. I don't know how to say it different, as we are right now. It's the unique flavor, and it's really unique of an individual, which is like a form which reflects qualities of light coming through it. So it's a particular taste of love, or recipe of love's vibrations, or a particular unique resonance of peacefulness, or different resonances of peacefulness, because we don't have just one, we don't just have oh, we also have the idea is to become as clear as possible, so there's a freedom in what needs to resonate. So that's a level of form which is very much outside of physical time as we know it, and can pass and continue from a kind of source outside time through generations, so there can be the same kind of love vibration resonating from one generation to the next through the female line, for example, with a particular note or flavor or sense. So on that level there's a lot of freedom within time and space. It can move, it can pass continents, you can feel the presence of your beloved or of your enemy or of whoever, whether or not you've ever even met them, just from watching them on YouTube, on the other side of the world. So it's regardless of space. You can feel the connection, whether they're, and it's not determined by whether they are sitting next to you in the next room or whether they are in Africa. The connection can be as strong or as weak. So it's not dependent on physical space. And it's not dependent on time. It's not changing. And that's a bit kind of weird, because that means that you can kind of really feel a very strong energetic connection with somebody, essential connection, and even blend with it. But it might not come into their experience until some other moment, or it might have been in their experience 6 months before. It doesn't have to be at the same physical time that it's happening. Because it's outside of physical time. That means that, you can be at home and you can feel, like 3 months from now, and you feel this incredible healing movement moving through your knee, and you say, I can feel Bart's energy all around me, and this healing effect is happening. And he could have actually experienced that movement in the course. And he could be busy at the dentist in Holland, not even thinking about you. Doesn't make it less real, because it's not caught in the laws of physical time.
So it's not happening at the same time, this guy in Africa and myself?
It doesn't have to be happening at the same time.
Not the same place, not the same time?
It doesn't. It's not caught in the laws of time and space. It's beyond, deeper.
Does it also mean that Bart, for sure, whether it was 3 months before, 2 months before, whether it was in Alaska, did do something or create something that I am now 3 months later in a certain moment sitting in a restaurant in Peru feeling this healing thing? Or am I receiving this not necessarily because he sent it or did it, but because I have a connection to Bart and it is coming up and moving through me when and how it needs
So
to?
first of all, it's not caught in time, so it could also be about the future. Because there's only now. On the essential level, there's only now. Secondly, when somebody moves very, very deeply with healing, they can only release their private self, which means that the field of the love, which is shining through that diamond, is much, much wider, and the conscious mind doesn't have to be conscious of it. So Bart could consciously do nothing, and this could be moving through.
And it's moving through because
Because we are much bigger than we think we are.
So like, it's always, supposedly it's like always there, and since I opened up, all of a sudden I feel it.
You become conscious of it. And it could be that he's
something
conscious.
that is there,
Yeah,
could be all the time.
yeah.
Could,
And it could be that he's conscious of it, and it could be that he's not conscious of it. And it could be he becomes conscious of it when you mention it. Because he checks into the timeless, and it's like, yes, this happened. But was he conscious of it at the time? No, he was at the
when I'm
dentist.
conscious of it, then all of a sudden the other person is
No.
conscious that I'm conscious.
Sometimes. It's just not caught. It doesn't mean that it can't all be in sync at the same time and everybody can be conscious and it's the same time in the same space. It's just not caught there. It's not obeying those rules.
And what are you calling this it that is not obeying all these rules?
The merging of essences, the essential connection, that level of the individual, that core level of the individual, of what we would call the individual.
Could be with someone who is not born yet, even?
And because it's important to understand that this essential layer is outside of time and space, which means that you access it through surrendering to the here and the now. And
It's
in
the
this,
essential layer.
yeah,
That's what you're
yeah. Which means it can't be got here. It can't be found later. It's here now, always. Never taken away, never threatened. It can't be wounded. It can only be covered up. But it in itself can't be wounded. It's all-powerful in that sense. It can't be wounded.
What I didn't get why the access to it is in the here and now.
Well, the access to it in the here and now is in the same way that the access to anything is in the here and now. The rest is mindfuck. You know, memory is in the here and now. Truth is here and now. Enlightenment is here and now.
I can understand it rationally, but I don't really feel that.
So when you say the access to it in the here and now, what this means practically in terms of what we're doing in this course is the access is through direct experience of it. So what is direct experience? It's not a mental thing. It's not an imagination. It's something we sense. It's through sensing, sensing inwardly our own atmosphere. And that's maybe a better way to say it, because you can only sense the floor by opening our senses in the here and now. So we can only sense the essence of ourselves or of somebody else in the here and now. Right?
Because it's a physical sense?
The physical senses are the only means. The only means we have to sense anything is through the physical. The only means we have to sense anything at all, even the saints in God and the angels and everything, is through our physical senses, which then imprinted in impressions through the brain, which is the headquarters. It's the main sensory organ, actually, it's the brain. It's the main receiver. So it's always through the physical senses. The problem is that we have been conditioned to believe that physical senses is like bang, bang, warm, warm, vulgar, outward only. And this is how we're trained. This is how science is built. The physical senses are outwardly facing organs to a blob of flesh. But that's not what they are. This is really not what the physical senses are, because, for example, just take the sense of hearing. If you're listening to sound, you open the sense of hearing, who's listening? Is it the ears that are listening and the sound is just happening? No, it's not. It's going somewhere through the networks, the finer networks of the brain, which are just networks, like hardware on a computer. It's wiring. So who's listening? Why is there listening? Why do we hear stuff? So this sense organs are channels which open both ways. There's somebody on the other side. There's something more essential, which is the listener. Otherwise there would be no listening. So in that sense, the physical senses are indoctrinated into us that it's outwardly listening to the truck on the road, but there is an inner listening to our own voices. There's an inner listening maybe that we're not so conscious of the rhythms of our body, of all the collection of all the senses together. There's an inner listening to that. There's a listening to the yearning of our own being, or a listening to the lack of something, what's missing. There is a listening to not just the voice or movements of another person, but there is a deeper listening to the whole kind of resonance of their love or of their peace. And of course, if we don't believe that the senses can open and sense better, be more refined, hear more and more subtle impressions, receive them, then they don't. They just don't open because we don't believe they can. This is the placebo effect. We don't think it's possible, so it doesn't happen. And that confirms it's not possible. All we can hear is the truck in the road. But it's absolutely illogical, because the moment we start actually relaxing into listening, we can hear so many. And the experience of relaxing into opening the senses is always a softening. It's always a kind of surrender, a permission to let also the subtle buzz of the heat, also the sound of the wind, to actually hear the sounds that are coming, the different flavors of them. So this is all in the here and now, clearly. It's moving into a refinement of agreeing to open up to now and to hear, also inwardly. That means that if you hear a voice that says, follow your heart, coming through there isn't a censor, there isn't a closure that says, oh, that's just a voice in my head. You really listen to the thought, the quality of it, the tone of it. There's no judgment. So what Bart talked about was the essential layer, and then the layer of personhood, and then the layer of ego. Now, we don't want to move into a kind of judgmental place where we say, personhood and being somebody is bad and the ego is the worst, and that we do that to ourselves. This would be a kind of violence. This would be like saying you're shit because you're traumatized. That means you're a bad person, in the path. It doesn't work like that. Personhood and ego structures are not things that we choose to have because we're bad people, because we did it wrong. It's not happening like that. A baby is born in the here and now, in pure experience, in this essential innocence and purity and freedom and trust. And what begins, first of all, before anyone does anything, is this realization of the physical. And the physical, as we know from Healing 4, is already trained in a way, with certain stress responses. From the mother's womb already, whatever biochemical reflection there was of her emotional condition, if she was depressed, if she was stressed, if she felt unseen or downtrodden, all of this subtle stuff is moving through the body of the baby as well, quite in attunement with the mother. So this is a little bit of a shock already to that essential being. Where there was purity, now there's this kind of struggle between shame and disgust, and it's connected with survival, which is important, survival. And the big mummy is the protector, so it's still moving like this. So this personhood is in a way inherited by the essence through some kind of resonance of what's needed from the soul. But we don't go there. But it's inherited. The whole history, not just the mother, but the mother's 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 mother, together with the particular attraction towards that blend of love.
What about father?
And the father, same. The mother is very much more in the foreground, but later on it balances out. It's really the same. Even if
forefathers.
Yeah.
All
those structures of authority and being an absolute zero, having no right to exist. I say it in a sexist way because it's mixed up, but all of that is also felt in the body.
After the babies.
Yes, also through the mother. In how she relates to her, what she's carrying towards males, what she's carrying towards her father, what she's carrying towards a lover or the father of the child. It's all there in stress responses and biochemical responses.
Did you just associate, because when you said something about sexist, did you just associate the right to exist and so forth through the masculine line?
The damage there in terms of being the violator and being the authority and having no authority and having to depend on authority is quite on the male aspect.
Having no...
that whole struggle.
That struggle between those things of having authority, not having authority, right to exist, that is coming through the male aspect.
It tends to be very strong in the male aspect also in women. And a lot of women are moving very much through the male aspect. Again, it's another course, the mother wound. So we've got this layer of inherited stuff, which is not who this incoming soul is. It's what it got on its plate. It's its first breakfast. It's what it's going to eat. It's the raw material of what it has in this life.
It's coming through the breast milk.
It's the opportunity also to be of service to the whole, to learn. It's the shit that turns to gold in terms of opportunity. No shit, no gold. Or as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, no compost, no lotus flower. He's more polite.
Yeah, much more poetic.
So this is already there. Fait accompli, already was there in the womb, it's already there in the birth. But then starts the environment. The should not, do this, which is very well intentioned. It's for survival, it's so the kid can fit in to the whole, which is about survival. Because if you get rejected from the whole, then in the world of instinct and mammalian animal world, which we are part of, you die. You're in danger. We are herd animals. But this, the first time the child gets rejected for shitting in the corner and not on the toilet or something, or for pulling the potato skins off the shayish, in their innocence, is a little trauma. And this little trauma creates a split of self, and there is this self, there is what they do in innocence and naturalness and playfulness, and there is what they should do. So this is what they should do, what they ought to do, is a false self. It's a self which we use to shield ourselves against, for the
What
sake.
just happened?
Yes,
Against the rejection
yes,
just
to fit
happened.
in.
Right.
It's where we begin to kind of adjust. Very early on. So the chances are, in 99.9% of the cases, for a little while, the child begins to believe they are this false self. And I use little examples, but if you can imagine, it's huge. It's a whole panorama of behaviors. This is who I am. It's conditional self, conditioned self, a self which is subject to conditions. The person. So also, now we've got the meal given to the baby, and this is the kind of sources, in a way, the second course. Which is totally okay, because it's incredibly vulnerable to be without it. It comes forward as a protection, as a survival means to survive, and that's why it's given. But if the baby isn't getting a constant connection to the essential and a nourishing and a permission to the essential qualities to shine through that, as more important together with the attuned conditions, like so it did something wrong, but the innocence is totally affirmed at the same time, then the essential bit gets like it doesn't exist anymore. The inner bit, it's not there. There's just this. And this false self can be good and it can be bad. It can do right and it can do wrong. It can make mistakes. It can be not okay. It's got a shadow already. So this shadow of the person means that there's something is missing. Something seems to be missing. And there is a threat all the time. There's fear all the time, because you could be wrong. And sometimes it seems that whatever you do, you're wrong. Out of naturalness still, because this is your body, this is your biology, this is your family context, but you go to school and it can seem that everything's wrong about you. You're a Jew.
Well, that makes sense. No, then that's okay.
In London, or whatever, you recognize it. So this not being okay, as you are in natural, as a person now, a person that makes mistakes, this kind of guilt is building. This fear of condemnation is already building. And it's hard to relax in that and just be innocence and peace and purity and freedom. So it's a little bit more lost. And the fear is stronger. There's like the executioner's axe is always just here. And his face is well covered, to quote Bob Dylan. The hard rain's going to come. So, here, rooted in that person, we see the birth of ego. Its roots are in the person, just as the person's roots are in the essence. Meaning to attack the ego is to attack the person, is to attack the essence. It's all rooted in. One is rooted in the other. For good reasons of survival and trying to be good, trying to be free. So here comes the ego. Let's fix it. What do I want to be? How can I be safe? How can I be better? How can I not be worse? Or if I'm going to be worse, how can I be the most glorious worse? How can I be seen? How can I be seen? Because that's what's missing. How can I be seen? But what's not seen? The ego doesn't want to be seen. The ego doesn't have anything to show. It's just, you want to be seen for the shield that's in front of your face. Hold a shield here and say, see me, see me. So maybe the person needs to be seen. It's nice when the person is seen. When somebody sees into your family structures, for better or worse, it doesn't matter, because it's such a good feeling to be seen.
But sometimes you're afraid of being seen.
Ego again.
And
But if I'm seen, I might be rejected, so I won't be seen in all of this. But if you're allowed to be seen and you're not judged, and they see that your grandfather was actually a rapist, and you can speak about it, it's an incredible relief. Or that your uncle was a war criminal and was shot by the Allies, or whatever. It's an incredible relief that it can be allowed. But we're still only at the level of personhood.
So some of the fears are inherent, are historical. That's what you're saying.
Oh, in that level of personhood, we go back now out of ego to personhood. We're carrying traumas from generation to generation. And this is scientifically proved. So I'll say a little bit about it because it keeps coming up. It's now, in the past 3 years, in epigenetics, they've found that there is a tag at a level above the
What's
genes.
the name, please?
Epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
Yes.
Epigenetics means the layer above the genes. What's controlling the expression of the genes or the repression of the genes. So there is a tag, which is basically a stress relating, a repressor, which represses the expression of certain genes to the refinement that they found, for example, in second generation Holocaust grandchildren, that they are carrying a particular epigenetic tag from the experience of their grandparents. They found it in third, second generation slaves.
When you say tag, you mean?
The gene is tagged as a stressor.
Okay.
For example, be free with men, shipada. Contract, don't do it. They're danger, death. If there was a rape 2 generations back. That's the kind of movement. It's not killing the gene, but it's repressing its expression. It's sending what its effect is that the body sees a threat, a death threat to its survival in something as if it was traumatized in this life, but it never was. And often its whole family is doing it. The Goy, the Arab, you know.
And the tag, when you say tag, excuse me, when you say tag, we're talking about something that is seen, there's a contraction on the gene. I can't imagine what this looks like.
There's a chemical block.
A chemical, okay, all right, okay.
Which
at a very, very subtle level.
Okay, a chemical block on the gene.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Okay.
It's not kind of a...
I know what tag would mean like that way, but I didn't know what it looked like. Okay.
So this that it's a very, very subtle level is very, very important. Already on the level of DNA, we're talking tiny. When we're talking about a tag on a particular bit of DNA, we're talking on the level of resonance. In terms of relaxation and stress and signals, we're talking on the level of resonance that we can actually make a change to how genes express. It's really, yeah.
What?
The whole alternative world is there, you know.
What did you just say?
She said homeopathy.
Oh.
Which means that when a trauma is successfully resolved, and what is a resolution of a trauma? It's not really about understanding, it's about brought to peace, brought through the cycle, into life, into consciousness, and laid to peace. It's no longer stressful. It's all about stress, basically, and survival. It's no longer stressful. Then the tag goes, and the gene starts to express again normally, which can be an incredible expansion of freedom. Where there was no freedom and where there was suffering, there becomes enjoyment.
You were wonderful.
And of course, this is like a kind of catch-22 thing, because it's always an interaction with the environment, with history, with stresses, with the emotions, which is part of the environment, with the inner experience, with the depth that we breathe. How much oxygen is going through the body? The moment we go into stress, we stop breathing. The heart vessels contract. All of this is affecting as well. It really is signaling a lot. So to start unpeeling it is going to be complicated. That's where the kind of global intuition and the opening of the senses helps as healers. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
So the basic point is that we can, enormous amount of our patterns and our stresses and our personality is inherited. And its characteristics where we suffer is mostly due to traumas from the generations, from our ancestors. Now the nature of this is, that as it repeats, is that probably we have also traumas in our life which are along the same lines. Because it creates itself in a way, because the things we most fear, we are most attracted to, like we're most afraid of rejection, so we kind of compose these environments where we get that experience of rejection. Until it's done, until that tag is lifted, and then it's not really an issue anymore. I take a big one, but there's plenty of examples. So sometimes with a client, you'll find that they have a little trauma, but they're going into total anxiety and panic about it, and it doesn't justify it. You say, what's the problem? There's a suck it up princess. It's like, what's your problem? So granddad slapped you. Some people had a whole. But that's wrong, because It could be that actually 2 generations before, and this child heroically is embodying the whole trauma. Somebody was raped and thrown into a river and nobody ever talked about it. And of course the key thing about trauma, what keeps trauma traumatic, is that nobody ever talks about it. It's the ancestor that nobody names. It's the story that nobody wants to tell. It's the one that's whispered in the dark alleys. It didn't start with us. It's not about us. We inherited it. This is incredibly liberating to understand, because then we inherited it because we can do something about it. We can be the ones to heal this, to end this. Whatever little thread it is, it didn't start with us. We were this essential identity coming into this form.
We were what? Did it last time?
We were this essential identity, this essence coming into this form.
So when the essence, or now we're going behind
The person, this
behind-
inheritance is in time. It's got a history. It's got a history going back to Adam and Eve or to the dinosaurs.
The essence, the pre-personhood, I'm just going to call it right
Yeah.
now. This essence. The essence is coming in already with this inherited trauma?
No,
No.
it's arriving on the ship of the inherited trauma, and this
Right.
ship is going on
Right.
as the
So
essences
it's the
come in and out.
personhood. It's the personhood we're talking about that's coming in with these traumas. Okay.
The personhood is inherited to a huge degree. Our reactions to it is something else, but the basic structures are inherited to the biochemical level.
That's why it's so hard to set your mind differently when you. I'm thinking about slavery, about the black people, that it's not over yet. The fight to auto-emancipate themselves out of slavery. It's like thinking as a slave, it's still there, it's still in their DNA.
When I go to slavery, it's Jews considering themselves victims. It's bringing it closer to home.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk, I don't know if you're going to go there or not, and if not, that's fine. But I just want to name a question that I have, whatever it is. How to remove this tag? So it doesn't have to happen now. I just wanted to say it.
The most, we try and stay according to what's needed for this course, which is about blending the inner light with the outer light.
Okay.
So the most important message here is it didn't start with you. What you're experiencing of your personhood, let alone your ego, which grew out of the personhood, which has roots deep inside the fears and stresses and longings of the person, it didn't start with you. It's not yours. You're carrying it, like you carry your whole family and your nation and the collective history of humanity, but it didn't start with you. It's not who you are. This is a very, very important point, because the first thing the child does in this kind of condemnation and difficulty in the environment is say, I'm not okay. I have to hide something of myself. I have to change the person because I'm not okay. And that's the ego layer.
That's the ego layer right there.
Yeah.
I've changed and I'm not okay.
Yeah, my person isn't okay absolutely and totally as it is, for what it is. Which it would be okay if you knew it wasn't you.
Before we talked about who wants to be seen, since this is something that, and we said that, okay, the ego is the one that's talking about the fear of being seen. The personhood wants to be seen. It's a relief to be seen. And what about the essence?
Absolutely, the light is shining, it doesn't want to be
Essence is
seen.
what?
The essence just shines, and what is there is a load of shields and blocks, and the window's closed, and
The essence isn't even in the space of looking at it as a want to be seen or not want to
it
be
just
seen.
shines
It
like
just
the sun.
shines regardless of anything, right? But the personhood is having the desire to be seen.
So the essence doesn't have emotions, it doesn't care if it is seen or not.
It has incredible care in it, but it's unconditional care.
Hmm?
It has incredible care as part of
Care.
itself. Incredible care, incredible love, incredible peace, but it doesn't have emotions or fears. It's not threatened, it's not afraid. It's
So
not
if
afraid.
I'm not seen, if the essence is not seen, then so I'm not. It's kind of acceptance of not being able, of
Well,
somebody
you know,
not recognizing it.
Imagine there is this wind blowing through you with incredible force. Yes? The whole power of the universe is in this is moving through this essence. And there's a plate here, and a wall here, and a window here. And these walls and plates and masks and the painting on front, it's alive. All the walls are alive. It feels the pressure of the wind wanting to blow through. It's stressed because it needs to get out of the way.
Uh-huh. But the wind is not frustrated.
No, the wind just blows
It just goes wherever it can.
through all the cracks.
If there's not a wall here, it'll go here. It'll go another
If the
way.
pressure's too strong, it will blow the whole show up.
Or the whole thing.
It will blow up, it will explode the whole ego structure. If the pressure is too strong, and you see this sometimes at a certain stage in life, where somebody has been so walled in and so doing right and being a good person and being this and they've done the whole ego thing and got the max pleasure that's like possible there and it didn't give any satisfaction at all. At a certain stage, they just go boom, and they leave their family, they leave their wife, they leave their job, and they explode their whole identity. This happens.
Yeah, a friend of mine did that.
It happens.
The I'm not okay, I have to change, this is personhood or this is ego?
Both.
Oh,
But especially ego. Personhood is more about survival and just what is there as a form genetically, as a character. Ego is even more about survival and pretense and trying to fill that gap, that bottomless pit, trying to fill that gap of lack of satisfaction.
that's ego.
Trying to fill it from the outside, from the world. If I have money, if I have this, if I have this, if only this one wasn't there. This is all the kind of ego thing, which is okay. It's just not helpful.
I think I need more clarity as we go along, doesn't have to have a personhood.
So the whole course is on this, because this is all about the gap between the inner light and the outer light. So, what to do about it? So, what we've got is 3 layers, and they're all based on fear, threat, and survival, and trauma.
The essence is not.
The the layer of personhood, the layer of ego is all based on trauma and survival, and the essence is, in a way, blocked, out, eclipsed, because of fear, survival, and trauma. And of course, in this zone of fear, survival, and trauma, there's incredible anger, incredible pain, which is, again, makes you not okay. Right? If you express your incredible anger, if you collapse in this river of pain, you're not okay, so it just starts up again. So with that, it has to be hidden. So, I'll give you a few hints of finding our way to letting the light come through in a way. So the first and most important thing is that whatever is here now is okay. Whatever is happening inside, outside, around, it's absolutely and totally what it is. It's okay. That's the starting point. There is no other starting point. If we start by saying it's not okay, we're not going anywhere, because we're not here. We close the senses. Right? So why would we say it's not okay when the most logical thing is that it's okay? Because sometimes it's incredibly vulnerable and counterintuitive in the terms of how we've been conditioned our whole lives through generations to say it's okay and to let it be an experience. It's the first thing is incredible sense of vulnerability. And that can feel like weakness, which means we can get killed again and traumatized again, and the whole thing starts up again. We're not really sold vulnerability as being the way to power and freedom. But if we're not able to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, then we resist what is here anyway, inside ourselves, which makes us very, very, very unsafe actually, because we don't know where we are anymore, because we're resisting experiencing it, so we don't know anything about where we are. We close down the sense organs, we stop breathing. Maybe because of something that happened 100 years ago that we don't even know about. So it's so important to allow the vulnerability as a means to open, to take this little risk. And it's not always possible. It can seem, on the outer world, if it's only an outer world, to be vulnerable. You know, if you're vulnerable when you're driving through the rush hour in Tel Aviv, you know, you're probably going to end up, you know, with a broken car. It's not always possible to be vulnerable, right? It's a real world, it's a hard world out there. There's Donald Trump, there's God knows what's going on down there, out there. It's not safe, there's fires, there's floods, it's not safe to be vulnerable. This is what, where we normally that's where it ends. So we can't be vulnerable because it's a survivor's world. Survival is the name of the game. It's not true. Of course we can be vulnerable. We can come home, take 5 minutes, go inside ourselves, which also exists, and be vulnerable for 5 minutes to ourselves. Feel our vulnerability. Feel our fear. Feel the pain which is there behind the anger, because there's no anger without pain at its source. Feel it with ourselves, by ourselves, in a sacred, safe space. Of course we can be vulnerable. Who took that away from us? You can put on all the armor, the ego, the person, the self, battle cap, take a machine gun to go outside the street, but that doesn't mean we give up our own home in which we can be vulnerable when we choose to in our freedom. So a willingness to be vulnerable, to take that extra few moments to notice within our own worlds. It's a training also, because when we do it in our own sacred safe space, the nervous system actually begins to learn the advantage of it. We become more aware of what's happening around us. Vulnerability actually makes us a little bit safer. We get more aware of where we get pain, where the hurt, where the daggers hit. We become more aware of our own patterns that we inherited in our person, where our grandmothers were damaged, where we are carrying that damage. We become more safe because we know that this knee is hurt. So we know to take more care of this knee when we go out on the battlefield, because we checked in on the pain of it, the vulnerability, when we were safe at home. It's that simple. It's a much deeper layer of survival in a way. It actually makes us more safe to be vulnerable, to be soft, to not rob ourselves of this basic right to experience what is here. So that's one way which is really, really helpful in moving towards healing this stuff and getting a freedom in which we don't have to do any violence to the forms which we're carrying. We just we can begin to allow the light to also be there. So if we take the example we began with, that Rachel asked about changing the childhood memory, the hard childhood memory in all of this. Right? It's not changing what happens, or what happened, or what will happen. It's just stopping to obscure the resource of essence which is also there at the same time. It's opening the perception. It's not changing the details. It's showing that also the sun was shining all the way through in a sun which can never be damaged, hurt, or taken away.
Yeah, but does that affect the childhood of the dead grandmother?
Yeah. Because
so basically, my being born now and experiencing this and allowing this and going back will shine through this child grandmother.
2 ways. Yes.
For
So-
and your grandchildren.
Yeah. And what is important is that your grandmother is waiting for this.
Is
Waiting for this.
will.
An aspect of your grandmother is waiting for this. The gratitude when you move through things like this, and the support from our ancestors is unbelievable.
You know, we get the traumas, but why do we get the traumas really? Now we leave the epigenetics aside, let's look at what's happening energetically. Because epigenetics is on the edge of energetic. Why do we get the traumas? Why? Isn't it because our grandparents are all our ancestors and the whole history is totally alive in us right now? That means their love, their wanting us to be happy, their drive towards healing, their need to resolve this. It's all there. So what happens with a lot of us when it's less conscious is, first of all, we think it's our trauma and there's something wrong with us. And then comes the epigenetic thing. Okay, it's because granddad raped his granddaughter, yes. And then we think that we got their shit. And they did this to us. This is the kind of like a automatic feeling, like we carry their trauma and we have to deal with it on their behalf. And if we don't deal with it, then our children are going to get the shit and they're going to have to deal with it. But that's just part of the deal. It's just part of it. What's underneath that is the whole continuation of a learning, with a whole resource, with a whole resilience that comes forward afterwards. They want, the wicked uncle that accidentally killed his mother wants you to be happy. He wants you to be free. He wants this one to, and all the next generations to be open, children of nirvana. That's what they want for us. That's the amount of gratitude through generations when something is brought to completion. And then, this is the real magic, and this they found scientifically, when something is resolved, it's not just that the gene is free, like the trauma never happened. That's not what comes. What comes next is you pass on the resilience to that trauma. And there's one doctor, he said, who would you rather take onto a battlefield? Somebody who's been through 3 wars or somebody who's never been through a war? Who would you feel safer with? So the resilience of having gone through the whole cycle of experience and found the freedom and reconnection with essence again out of it is also inherited. So then you get grandchildren that they know how to deal with the warning signs of a Shoah, but they're not freaking and panicking and freezing and fighting off every stranger. But they've got a depth of wisdom about this issue of genocide. They can smell it. They know how to talk to the Nazi because he's also part of the story. They understand the psychology. They know the Nazi within.
Who knows what the Nazi within?
Somebody who's totally done the cycle
Okay.
of the Holocaust trauma isn't going to say this is all about victims versus Nazis. Because in every trauma, the abuser is also part of the story. And the most forbidden traumas, the ones we never talk about, the ones that no family will own, is the ones where they were the abusers.
Right.
It's the Germans we want to worry about right now.
That's why I said.
They don't have war memorials. They don't have honoring the war victims. They don't have grieving the guys that had to murder the Jews. Nobody does. But it's totally in the energy. And that means that here in Israel, we carry that too. We carry genocide within us alive and well because it never went through the cycle of trauma.
Doesn't it put a responsibility on me specifically if I know that my grandmother has a terrible childhood and I could help her and maybe I'm not doing enough to help that 5-year-old grandmother to have a better childhood?
It's absolutely
Totally surfacing through you as you now. What's never not experienced directly through you as yours now, it's a fantasy. It's for maybe your sister to do. Each person gets a different strain. So that the whole guilt obligation thing, that's not part of it. That's traumatic speak.
That's
You're
traumatic
speaking the
speak.
trauma.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the essence of the trauma.
Like the guilt.
Guilt obligation. You have to heal it. No,
You fail to hear it.
you fail to
No,
heal
but
it.
I want to.
Yeah, it's quite a nice adventure.
But you'll find it in exactly what you experience intimately in your life. It's not any further away than that. It's alive in you, as you. It's alive as you. You're not separate from them.
No, you sort of feel you want to be better, more effective.
It's allowing, is it okay if I say something?
I'm done really.
Okay, so it's basically nothing else as allowing the irrational. That, something very simple happens and an irrational fear is coming
The
forward.
rational or irrational?
Irrational. An irrational fear is coming forward. We have no idea where it's coming from. It comes from the body. The body is reacting irrational in certain situations. To allow the irrational, take it serious. Treat it with compassion. When I've got a wound on my hand and Georgi tries to touch me, I do like this. This is an irrational movement. But it's the body moving like this. I'm wounded, don't touch me. Even if it doesn't take care. She wants to put a plaster on it. You understand? But this movement is there for a reason. The body feels threatened. So it comes from the body. And to allow the irrational things and to kind of really, how do we remove attack by nothing else is allowing the irrational things go to the depth of the fear, of the pain, of the loneliness. Allow it. Recognize where it's coming from. Go to its source. Just watch it. Be aware of it. Be conscious of it. Allow life to move through you as it needs to move through you. So as light is going through this diamond of inner qualities, life is moving through the body. And life throws up by itself. It's like water moving through the body, throws up by itself to the surface where the contractions are in life experiences in how we react in daily life. It's very, very simple. Just live. Just live your life and see your life as the teacher. Because life is teaching you exactly where attention is needed. And normally what we do, and this is the ego, is that we ignore life and jump over in how we want to be and what has to be. And all the vulnerability is not allowed. And then we are not able to do the work. And the work is not about you. The work is really for all of us. Every little piece of work we do on ourselves is for all of us. It moves through the generations. A lot is from the generations. Backwards and forwards.
Collectively and individually.
Like what?
Collectively and individually. It's quite awesome.
Yeah, it's quite awesome.
So basically it's easier for passive people than for active people.
It's easier for people who are able to be receptive
Yeah,
as
receptive.
for people who need to be active all the time. Yeah.
So maybe women are usually more receptive and more passive. Maybe they are more able.
They seem to be more developed and care more about things like this. As men have more a tendency to care more about how it looks. To prove themselves.
So that's the trauma.
It's trauma. It's
It's really trauma, and that's the trauma of the gender split
Yeah.
as well. Because what's really happening is the more we open up, the more receptive we are, the more we let everything through, the more the channel is open and the more expressive we become.
Yeah.
Somebody who's kind of acting will act more and more clumsily and more superficially. Somebody who's how would it work the opposite?
Somebody who's more receptive is able to receive what's needed instead of putting down the wall of what has to be or how it's right. You understand? To give an answer before you listen will never or not often be an answer which is helpful. So first you have to understand the problem before you can give an answer. You understand? So if you're too active, you put answer on answer on answer in the hope that you're lucky and have the right answer. But you don't even know what it is the right answer towards.
But at its core, the agreement to be receptive, to open, the agreement to open, which requires a relaxation, which is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to relax. That's the initiator.
Yeah.
That's the first step, and then the action comes and the reaction, and that's the way to true action, to living in a way, to say it another way. Receptive is the initiator. So in terms of male-female polarity, you can take that where you want. Women initiate men. Women give birth. Women conceive. But it's not really about that, because on that there's a whole load of bullshit.
And that's what
It's about the whole cosmos in a way. It's about the emptiness, the darkness, the dark matter, the way space is moving with the physical. There's a lot more in it. But, just take knowledge, knowing stuff. Everyone, the emphasis in our conditioning is to know, you have to know, you have to know, you have to know, you have to know. Well, how do you know anything at all? Without opening to the unknown. Otherwise, it's just one thing you would ever know, right? So there always has to be this first receptive, vulnerable movement of saying, I don't know, in order to know something new, right? You don't just get knowing like that. It's always led by the receptive. No receptive, no nothing, no universe, no mind. And that's just one example, the receptive leading. It's another graduate course, the receptive universe.